Welcome to Neanderthal Story Time, Part 4. Title: Fucked Collins. Dad! Dad! Chuck Collins is on! Holy fuck! I drop my boiling pot of spaghetti on the kitchen floor and sprint full force into my living room. Dad, you slowpoke, you almost missed the weather report.
First, there's Chief Meteorologist Chuck Collins with a first look at our forecast.
All right, guys, the hottest temperature of the season thus far today, 96 officially in Peoria. That's the 7th 90-degree day we've had in May and June, most of them in June. Let's take a look at the currents because this is significant. It's 82 in Peoria. That should be a normal high this time of the year, let alone a 10 o'clock temperature. But we have some drier air filtering into the region. We'll be in the upper 80s with some westerly breezes tomorrow. All your forecast details coming your way. First of all, check out your almanac numbers for the day.
Wow, Dad, he's so cool. Have you ever met Chuck Collins? I sit down on the shag carpet beside my son and start rubbing my spaghetti hands through his soft hair. Well, child, you know I used to work for WEEK 25 News Team, right? My son looks to me with big, round, glistening eyes, ripe with juice. Wow, I didn't know that. So you worked with Chuck Collins, the best local weatherman around? Now, son, you have to understand that my position at WEEK 25 was only for a short while. I didn't work alongside the fabled Chuck Collins. My son looks at me, his lips quivering and his juicy eyes draining onto the carpet. But there was one time I met him, at the WEEK 25 News Crew Memorial Day Cookout. Yes, it was a lovely summer day, and everyone important was there. There was Mark Welp and Gretchen Wirtz from the Good Company daytime talk show segment. The evening anchor Eric Green and Cassandra Hagar were there too, and they were totally hooking up. Jim Matson was cooking up some Korean short ribs, and Gary Moore was pouring up some tall drinks. Yep, everyone who was anyone was there, and we were all living up the good life. The sun was beating down, deep and long-standing sexual tension was in the air, and you knew someone was going to get AIDS later that day. Yeah, we were pretty much rock stars back then. But Dad, why were you there? That's not important, so shut the fuck up and let me tell the story. So anyway, we were all standing around playing some topless volleyball, and he showed up. You know who I mean. Chuck Collins, the legend himself. Wow, so you did meet him? Keep your goddamn trap shut, or else Mom's not coming out tonight. Okay, sorry, Pops. Chuck Collins showed up, but it wasn't the fabled returning that you'd expect. No, he was in a pretty bad state. That's right, he was overboozed, overfed, oversexed, and he had this crazed look in his eye. That kind of look that tells you to fuck off or get fucked in one sweeping glare. So there we were, having the time of our professional lives, and this shitty maroon 1993 Buick comes squealing over from off the freeway. It's swerving left, it's swerving right, just trying to slow down. Then it comes to a screeching halt as it runs over Jim Matson's grill and sprays hot summer mud over Gary Moore's minibar. Then, from the rust and chip paint, emerges Chuck Collins. He came out of that Buick like a bat out of hell, crouching over, shaking his hands and making googly eyes at the sexy, underaged interns. You should have seen the state he was in. He was wearing a greasy and ripped-up wife beater that let his fupa hang out and dangle over the coleslaw. But that's not even the worst part. He was also wearing these worn-out basketball shorts that showed off his big, dumpy ass whenever he managed to turn his back and strut around. Oh, it was appalling. He totally killed the good vibes everyone had. He was grabbing cans of Pabst Blue Ribbon and shotgunning them 3 at a time. He was doing cocaine off Cassandra's legs and shitting in the punch bowl. Oh, just deplorable behavior from such a talented and respected man. But that's not even half as bad as what he did to the hosts of Good Company. So after some of the edge had worn off since he showed up, we were all starting to mingle and the sexual tension was beginning to return. Then, Chuck had this crazed look in his eye, that one I mentioned earlier. He was scanning the cookout for something to fuck. Like a lion scanning the savannah for prey, he was looking for some hot ass. If another man made eye contact with him, he would screech like a falcon and rush over and gouge out their eyes with his fingers. He was prowling all fours, fupa scraping the ground and ass cheeks gliding frictionless across each other. Then he spotted Gretchen Wirtz, the hottest ass at the cookout and co-host of the Good Company morning segment. Now it's no secret that the two hosts of Good Company, Gretchen Wirtz and Mark Welp, fuck the shit out of each other on a regular basis. Their relationship is nothing romantic by no means, just a hardcore fling that keeps relations good for broadcasting purposes. But Chuck Collins, being the alpha male, the silverback, if you will, of the WEEK 25 news crew, knows that what's his is his for the taking. So, by somersaulting his way over to Gretchen and landing firmly on both hands, Chuck spread his legs and grabbed her in a chokehold between his thighs. Gretchen, being the beta bitch that she is, knew that she couldn't fight this and just accepted her destiny. She crumpled to the ground and Chuck grabbed her with his pedipalps, dragging her up into a nearby tree. He pulled out a bottle of Jaeger out from beneath his fupa and force-fed her the bottle by shoving it halfway down her neck and draining it directly into her stomach. Then, he stripped them both nude and mounted, fucking her insane arachnid style in front of the whole WEEK 25 news team. This whole time, Mark Welp just stood there shocked, feeling betrayed and offended that another male would steal his squeeze. Mark crumpled up his red Solo cup and threw it to the ground, his face flushed in despair and intense anger. He was mad, but he wouldn't dare attempt to stop Chuck in his escapades. No one would. So instead, he began plotting revenge.
But Dad, what were you doing during all this?
Jesus Christ, don't ask such fucking stupid questions. Anyway, back to the story. After having been thoroughly fucked, Chuck released Gretchen and everyone went back to doing their cookout thing. Gretchen didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the cookout, most certainly not Mark. Things were tense and awkward, and people didn't know if Gretchen was the one who got AIDS. Chuck Collins prowled the cookout grounds like an ape, dragging his nails through tree bark and pissing on Gretchen to mark his territory. Mark Welp stared daggers at Chuck Collins, but Chuck's eyes flashed a brilliant orange beam right back at Mark, partially blinding him permanently. Mark's dark thoughts for revenge were seeded, and Chuck Collins would most certainly pay for his actions at the WEEK 25 News Crew Memorial Day Cookout. Flash forward to the following week, Mark and Gretchen never mentioned the cookout to each other, and things were pretty awkward between the two. The Good Company segment was suffering due to their lack of on-screen chemistry. Then, one day after they were done recording their show, Mark Welp snapped. God damn it, Gretch, why did you fuck him like that, in front of everyone? Mark, sweetie, you know why. It's Chuck Collins. He's a force of fucking nature, one of the 4 elements. You can't stop him. You know what they say. There are 3 things you can be sure of in life: death, taxes, and Chuck Collins' insatiable sex drive. You say no one can stop him, but I think I can. I can put an end to his tyranny of the newsroom. Mark, honey, you can't stop him. People have tried in the past. Remember Libby Allison? She wouldn't sleep with him, so he threw her off the Chase Bank building in downtown Peoria. She's fucking dead now, Mark. And even further back, when Chuck took that vacation to the southeast, and he had that bad plate of gumbo, he was so offended that he started Hurricane Isaac. Mark, he's the best weatherman around, and he caused over $2 billion in damage over a plate of shitty stew. You can't fight a man with that kind of power. I don't plan on fighting him, at least not head-on. No, I have a better plan, but I need you to help me. Gretchen grabbed Mark by the shoulders, her face beet red. Mark, this is suicide. He's a literal god. You can't do this. I won't see another person get hurt because of Chuck Collins. Tears flooding her eyes, she ran away, arms flailing about. Dad, how did you see all this happen? I grabbed my son's tongue from within his mouth before he can utter another word. I will rip this from your fucking skull if you keep with the dumb questions. Got it? He nods his precious head up and down, and I continue holding his tongue. I release him. Anyway, later that night at Sully's pub in downtown Peoria, Mark was sitting at the bar, drowning away his sorrows in vodka and tonic. The clock was pushing midnight, and his beard stubble was starting to push through. Then, before he could totally pass out in his puddle of tears and blood, she struts into the pub. It's Gretchen. She runs over to the bar, taps her palm onto the counter, and nods to the bartender. The bartender nods back with a big grin and pours her 2 shots of whiskey. She knocks them both back at the same time and screams like a wild howler monkey to the entire bar. Mark calmly looked at her. What do you want? You here to make sure I don't commit suicide tonight? No, Mark. I'm here to join forces with you. I want to take down Chuck Collins. She taps the bar again for more drinks, gets them, and knocks them back, followed by another howler monkey scream. Mark begins to cry out of joy. Don't you want to hear my plan before you agree to anything? Gretchen shoved her palm into his face before he could say another word. No, not now, not here. Right now I want to get crunk and scream like the primate I am. Oh, Gretch. Later that night, Mark and Gretchen went back to Mark's place and had sloppy, drunk people sex, while each of them played an 80s saxophone solo.
Dad, what's the difference between drunk people sex and regular sex?
Finally, a good question. The difference, son, is that regular sex is how normal people are conceived, and drunk people sex is how you were conceived. Got it? Continuing, 3 days later, during a recording of Good Company, Mark and Gretchen were interviewing the owner of the restaurant Salt in Peoria Heights. So Travis, I hear you guys have some killer mac and cheese. Mark groans a little while checking his watch. Oh yes, we put in some grilled chicken as well as Cajun spices. The kids will love it, Travis responded.
What else is good on the menu?
Gretchen asked. Well, Travis began but was cut off by Mark. Hold on a second, Travis. I gotta give Gretchen a message. Mark stood up from his chair, walked 2 feet over to where Gretchen was sitting, and hands her a folded brown piece of paper. Sorry about that, Travis. Just need to notify Gretchen about our plans. Mark nodded and winked slowly over to Gretchen. She returned the nod and wink combo. Travis glanced awkwardly over between Gretchen and Mark. No one said anything.
Well, I think that's time to go to a commercial break. Get the fuck out, Travis, Gretchen said.
A little bit later, Mark and Gretchen were meeting by the water cooler. Mark took a sip from a shitty little water cup. Gretchen, did you get my note? Before she could answer, Chuck Collins himself walked over. Well, if it isn't the local talk show host. Chuck spies Gretchen's ass and reels his hand back for a solid grasp. His eyes wild and mouth gaped. He rushed his hand in and squeezed her ass between his fingers. His eyes cringed as his tongue poked out between his gnarly and spacious teeth. He then let her go, filled up his shitty water cup with some crisp and cool water, and walked away whistling the tune of Holla Back Girl to himself. Gretchen looked back to Mark.
This shit is bananas. Would you believe the gall of that man? Just meet me at the address on the note tonight. We will discuss the plans.
They both nodded and walked off. Later that night, the wind was sharp and the sky rainy. They met on the roof of the Paradise Hotel in East Peoria, both of them dressed in mysterious black cloaks with face paint. Were you followed? Mark said to Gretchen.
Probably not.
Good. Are you ready to hear my plan? Gretchen nodded her wet and slimy head. Okay, what I'm about to tell you is the best way to kill a weatherman. It will be the perfect crime.
Let's hear it. Come on, it's fucking raining out here and I want to go home and watch Castle.
Okay, we're gonna murder him on air, while he's giving the weather. This way, he'll be distracted and his powers won't be focused to defend himself from would-be assailants. Gretchen nodded her head with deep enthusiasm, her understanding of the plan deep.
Good, good. But won't other people see us? I mean, we wouldn't be very subtle. No, that's the thing. We'll be wearing green morph suits the whole time. That way the green screen cameras won't see us. We'll be completely invisible. That's genius. Everyone knows those cameras can't see green. We'll be like ghosts. But how do we dispose of the body? We'll cut up his corpse and pass it off as an ingredient in our cooking demonstration during the next airing of Good Company. No one will think twice about it, and we'll get rid of all evidence. I get you. But I've found one flaw in your plan. Wouldn't people think it's weird if we're wearing green morph suits to work? Mark sombered his expression. Okay, here's the hardest part. We have to wait till St. Patrick's Day to kill him. That way, no one would ever think to question our green wardrobe choices. St. Patrick's Day? But it's June right now. That's almost a whole year to wait. I want to feast upon his weatherman flesh as soon as possible. Mark stood in close to Gretchen, wrapping his arms around her, caressing her shuddering body. Patience, Gretch. Patience. Good things come to those who wait, and we're good company. So, Mark and Gretchen waited almost a whole year for the next St. Patrick's Day to arrive. They continued as the unrelenting hosts of Good Company and suffered through the being Chuck Collins and his wacky antics. In that stretch of many months, Chuck Collins had ravaging sex with over 400 women, murdered over 600 small children, ate 1,000 stray cats and dogs, and destroyed near $1 trillion in American infrastructure. He managed to single-handedly throw the heartland region of Illinois into a near post-apocalyptic state with his meteorological talents. The powers of Chuck were growing over this time, and Mark and Gretchen had doubts as to whether their plan would even work. Then, on the night of St. Patrick's Day Eve, Gretchen was over at Mark's house getting laid. Marky, do you think we'll survive tomorrow? Of course we will. The plan is literally impossible to mess up. It's too genius to go wrong, Mark answered mid-thrust. But Chuck Collins has become more powerful as a weatherman during our hiatus. I mean, he flies around the central Illinois wasteland via his tornado chariot to keep watch on the region and to make sure people aren't stepping out of line. After some more thrusting, Gretch, I don't care how strong he is. We need to stop him. His rampage over the earth has come to an end, and we're the ones to do it.
Oh, yes, Daddy.
Gretchen began crying in Mark's arms as he finished up. Then, they were ready to do the deed. They were ready to kill Chuck Collins. Dad, is the story almost over? I have to go potty. Kill yourself, son. Literally kill yourself. On the day of St. Patrick's Day, Mark and Gretchen showed up to work in full gear. I'm talking they had the tools of those who wished to end a legend. Green morph suits along with brandished knives and cheese wire. They walked in with their heads held high, ready to read the news, shoot the shit, and kill. A lowly intern approached the couple. Wow, you guys really went out for St. Patty's Day, eh? Looking good, both of you. As the intern walked off, Mark and Gretchen gave each other solid high fives and made their way to set. They filmed the entire episode of Good Company, feeling strong and confident about their abilities. Mark and Gretchen stood by the water cooler, drinking straight through their breathable morph suit fabric, when the lights dimmed all throughout the studio. A stiff breeze swept throughout the place as Chuck Collins came soaring in, feet above the floor, a mini tornado levitating him. He spoke to the crew in a demonic voice.
Ladies and gentlemen, time for the main event, the weather report.
He glided through the air, knocking over expensive equipment and tossing interns left and right. He landed firmly in front of his green screen, looking sharp and ready for the camera. Mark and Gretchen looked to each other sternly, knowing that their time for action has come. Chuck began reporting the weather.
So that gives us very comfortable conditions, and it looks like we'll keep that pattern. I just dropped my clicker.
As Chuck was reading the weather, Mark and Gretchen moved in. Mark rushed in quickly, pushing aside people and knocking over cameras and lighting equipment during the process. "Oh shit," a cameraman said. "Knocked over my camera." Gretchen flanked around the side, weaving and leaping over set pieces and employees of the news station.
As Mark got close, he ran in and bum-rushed Chuck Collins and shoved 2 well-sharpened chef's knives into Chuck's gut. Chuck's weather report was stopped dead short. The filming crew looked at Chuck with odd gazes, not knowing why he had halted during the live recording.
Chuck,
someone whispered.
why are you stopping?
During the confusion, Gretchen ran in and wrapped a cheese wire noose around Chuck's fat and greasy neck. Mark whispered,
Do it!
to Gretchen while pumping his fist in the air. There's knives in me! Chuck painfully moaned as Gretchen leapt into the air, somersaulting through the above rafters, holding the long end of the cheese wire noose in her hands. Once she landed, Mark grabbed his 2 knives and yanked them out of Chuck's belly, tearing open his entire abdominal cavity, thus spilling his guts and internal organs all over the studio floor.
Oh my god!
A crew member yelled. What's happening? Mark ran over to assist Gretchen, and the 2 of them pulled hard on the cheese wire. Their combined strength hoisted the dying body of Chuck Collins up into the rafters by the neck, while the cameramen made sure to keep the entire scene perfectly in frame the whole time. So there he was, Chuck Collins dangling from the neck by a cheese wire noose, with his blood, guts, and feces being poured out of him onto the studio floor. The broadcast was live, and the people in their central Illinois home saw the whole thing in its glorious horror. It looked to them like a mysterious and unseen force was horrifically murdering the best local weatherman in the world. Once Chuck was hung from a respectable height, Gretchen tied down her end of the wire to a nearby pole and, along with Mark, rushed underneath the dangling and wriggling Chuck Collins. This is what you get for being a cuck, Collins, Mark and Gretchen yelled in unison. Mark grabbed Chuck's left leg while Gretchen grabbed his right, and by pulling down with a force that only lovers could muster, the cheese wire cut cleanly through Chuck's thick neck, and he and his dumpy, frumpy body fell to the ground with a shuddering thud. Mark reached down and picked up the severed head of Chuck Collins and held it in the palms of his 2 hands. To everyone else, it appeared as if Chuck's head was magically floating above the set floor. This is what you get for laying waste to my woman's pussy, you dirty bitch. Then, in a burst of orange and powerful flaming light, the head of Chuck Collins came back to life.
You dare kill me? I am Chuck Collins, the most powerful local weatherman in the universe.
Mark dropped the writhing head onto the floor and gave it a firm curb stomp into oblivion.
Mark, we need to get rid of the body before anyone notices what's happened.
Quickly and with much stealth, Mark and Gretchen grabbed the mangled corpse of Chuck Collins' body and scooted it off the weather set and back to the Good Company kitchen. The filming crew looked around aimlessly, not sure what to do. Where did Chuck Collins go? Was he just murdered or something? An intern walked over to the large and substantial pile of body, bile, and organs and began to mop up the mess. And that, son, is how the world was rid of the tyranny of Chuck Collins, the greatest and most powerful local weatherman in the multiverse.
Were they successful in disposing the body?
Oh yeah, they served him up in their cooking segment on the next episode of Good Company. No one even noticed that their main ingredient was the disfigured corpse of Chuck Collins.
Welcome back to Good Company. We are here at the Dixon Seafood Shop in East Peoria. Of course, there's a Peoria location too. Jim Dixon is joining me again, and we had such a good time last time. We're here again to learn more about salmon. And there's a lot to learn about salmon.
Yeah.
But wait, he's not dead. We just saw him report the weather like 20 minutes ago.
Son, he's not actually dead. At least not in real life. Not yet, anyway.
So what you just told me was a lie? It was all a made-up story?
Well, son, it's only a lie if it doesn't happen for real. Maybe we can spread the word and it can all happen in real life, thus making the story true. Lies are just truths waiting to happen, son. That's the moral of the story.
The moral is that we should all kill Chuck Collins?
Only if you want it to be, son. Only if you want it to be.
Thank you for listening to Neanderthal Story Time. Title:
fucked Collins.
The end.